Hello everyone, it is Shakes. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Today I'm going to be going over which classes you should choose when you start playing Valorant. Now I recently got into the Valorant closed beta. One of the few small perks that you get as a small YouTuber is that it is a little bit easier to get your hands on closed beta keys like the one for Valorant, which is very nice. And because of that, I have the ability to give you guys videos on it. So anyway, the first thing we're going to go over is obviously which class you should play, because there's a bunch of different characters. There's, each agent is way different. They have a bunch of different abilities, and it's not just like CSGO where everybody has access to all the grenades. So it's not like people have specific playstyles other than, obviously Opper or Rifler. That's pretty much, that's the roles they have in the pro scene. But in Valorant, everybody is going to want to, you want to play a role based on your character. So you should choose a character that fits your playstyle. For example, I started playing Phoenix a lot, and that's because, he's very entry fragger based. He has, for example, flashbangs and things that just let him get out first, and he's just pretty simple. And yeah, he's pretty good if you want to be the entry fragger, get the first shot out. Each of their abilities allow them to play way different from every other class. So for example, Cypher, he has like a camera that you can throw on the wall. He's a lot of things that kind of give you the position of the enemy, and maybe you can use him to, if you're on the defensive side, you're going to be the one person that's holding down one side all alone, because you have Cypher, because you have the camera, because you have all these things that allow you to see people without actually having to put yourself in trouble. So anyway, based on who you're choosing, that is how you should playstyle. So that's why you got to know which class you're going to want to choose. So anyway, I'm just going to run through them really quick so you kind of have an understanding of who you want to play, so you can kind of like look into them and see what are the best plays for them, understand how to play them. So once you get your hands on the game, it's going to be you're just going to know what kind of character fits your playstyle the best. So without further ado, as I said before, we're going to start with Phoenix. So Phoenix's first ability is Blaze. It's actually one of my favorite abilities in the game. It allows him to summon a firewall, and it's not just like any wall. He can, when an enemy walks through it, as you'd expect, it does hurt them, but when you walk through it, it actually gives you healing, which is really nice. He's one of the only characters that can heal themselves, which is, obviously a great perk. It allows you to solo carry a little bit more. If you do not have a healer on your team, it's really, really nice to be able to heal yourself after an engagement. So yeah, that's what I like a lot about him. And as for the next ability he has, as I said before, he has a flashbang, but he has a curveball. It's called curveball, so you can chuck it around a corner. So when you are pushing out of an area, you can just chuck it around the corner. If anybody is really close, a lot of people tend to, camp in corners and stuff, as you'd expect in this kind of game. So, if you just chuck around a curveball, flashbang, then it's going to explode, and obviously it's going to impair their vision and make it way harder for them to react, and then you're going to have the advantage in that situation. So he's really, really good for, pushing out yourself, pushing out first, and yeah, that's one of my favorite things about him. Generally he does have a pretty simple kit compared to some of the other characters, but he does his job pretty well. If you do think you have pretty good aim and are willing to sacrifice yourself to, always be the first one out and probably the first one to die, to give yourself and your team an opportunity to push into the site, if you're willing to do that, then Phoenix is a great pick. And as for his signature ability, which is the one that you don't have to buy, you automatically get it every round, he throws a fireball that covers a small area of flames, and it's pretty much just like an incendiary that's on another class. It's pretty easy to use. You just kind of check it in the corner, a few things someone's hiding in there, and they're probably going to burn if they don't push out of there. So it kind of allows you to, it pretty much just allows you to check corners without actually having to peek them. So that is a pretty useful skill. And the final thing that he has is actually one of my favorite ultimates in the game, which is it's called Run It Back. It's pretty much like Iana in Rainbow Six Siege. If you've played that game, you kind of know what I mean. You can kind of hide in a corner, stay safe, and then you can send out almost a decoy. But with this decoy, it has a limited timer, and when you're in this decoy, you can get frags, you can push up, you can kind of be a little bit ballsy, because you know that if you die, you're just going to teleport right back to your normal self, those hiding in that safe location, and if the timer runs out, you're automatically going to teleport back there too. And this ultimate is really, really useful if you don't know how safe it is to push into an area, because you could just check out your decoy, try to get a few frags. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. It doesn't really matter. You're going to have the understanding of, if there's enemies around, is it safe or not. So yeah, that's why it is so useful. It's kind of like you have a second life for a few seconds. As for the next character, Jett, this one's a little bit of a fan favorite for a lot of people, a lot of streamers. It was one of the most picked characters, if not the most picked that I saw. And I think this is mainly a result of how offensive her kit is. It's pretty fun, it's pretty simple. One of her abilities allows her to just throw a smoke, and it dissipates pretty quickly compared to some of the other smokes, but you can kind of control it, you can kind of choose where it lands a little bit better than other classes, so that's why it's so useful. And it is pretty quick just because it kind of fits her style. She moves around a lot, and that's, kind of relates with her next ability, which is Updraft. It kind of allows you to launch up into the air so you can get to higher places. Maybe there's a little bit of a camping spot that's a little bit higher that you can get on top of if you have that. But keep in mind that if you do fly up into the air, your gun will become inaccurate. So just keep that in mind. I see a lot of people jumping up and using it and then just spraying as they're falling down, which never really works because the gun is incredibly inaccurate when doing that. Now her signature ability is it kind of allows her to dash a short distance in whatever direction she's moving, which is pretty simple. It's pretty useful if you want to get to a place really quickly, or you just want to cross a gap without anybody, having the chance to shoot you, and her ultimate is probably one of the coolest ones in the game. She kind of gets out a flurry of knives, and if you hit someone with a headshot, it automatically kills them, and then it refills all the knives you have. However, if you do miss all of your shots, then you're obviously going to be wasting your ultimate, so it isn't that easy to use, so just kind of keep that in mind if you want to choose her. She does take a little bit of skill, especially when hitting her knives at the end with her ultimate, because, you know, they are projectiles, which makes it a little bit more difficult, and you do have to hit headshots to get, you know, an instant kill. So just kind of keep that in mind if you want to play Jett. A lot of people like to play Jett, and it's pretty simple to see why. She is a very movement-oriented character, so if you like being, you know, having a lot of movement in a game, this character is probably for you. And for the next one, it is Viper. This one's a little bit more complex, it's a little bit harder to understand, so if you do have some time in the game, then I'd recommend picking her up. But if you don't, if it's one of your first characters, I wouldn't recommend trying her, because she is pretty irritating, and if you use her wrong, you can actually hurt your teammates. So just kind of keep that in mind, understand what she's, you know, how to use her abilities before you jump in with her. So anyway, her first ability is Snakebite. It's kind of just a projectile that creates a pool of acid, so it's kind of like, you know, you can't stand in. It's kind of like the firebomb that I spoke about before. And the next ability she has is going to be a poison cloud. It's pretty much just a smoke grenade, but if an enemy walks through it, then it will hurt them, and it is also green. Very cool. Her signature ability is Toxic Screen. Now this creates a massive wall of acid, so people can't really walk through it, and yeah, it is pretty useful if you want to block off areas, or you just want an area that only you can walk through very easily. And both of those abilities, you know, Poison Cloud and the Toxic Screen, both use toxic fuel, so if you throw one out, then, you know, it's going to be going down all your fuel meter, and then if you resorb it, it's going to start charging back up. So, you know, you kind of have to be understanding of, you know, your fuel usage, just so you don't use all of it up in one ability when, for example, you don't have any fuel left, but you really want to block off an area with your Poison Cloud. So just kind of keep that in mind. You kind of have to understand your fuel usage. And for her ultimate, it's called Viper's Pit. She kind of just creates a massive poison cloud that blankets, you know, a very large area. You can usually put it on top of the bomb if you're like defending it and you don't want anybody to come near it. And if enemies walk in it, they're going to have a very, very short amount of space that they can see. They're essentially not going to be able to see you when they're inside the cloud, but you're going to be able to see them. So it kind of gives you a massive advantage when they're trying to push in and try to defuse the bomb if you have it on top of it. So, you know, you can just cover a massive area, and if anybody tries to contest it, you're going to have a massive advantage. But yeah, as I said before, Viper is pretty hard to use. She does have a little bit of fuel mechanics, so you can use it all up and not understand how to use it well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Only start playing here after you've, you know, had some hours in the game and kind of understand all the mechanics, so you don't end up harming your teammates, because a lot of these abilities actually can be very, very irritating for teammates. So yeah, have some hours before you play Viper. And yeah, without further ado, let's go to Sova. Sova is the bow and arrow dude in Valorant, and yeah, he has pretty simplistic abilities. Most of them are obviously going to be based on his bow and arrow. So his first ability is a shock bolt, so you can kind of shoot it, and it's going to do a lot of damage to an enemy if you hit them, and it has a little bit of a blast radius, so if you don't quite hit them, it can still do a lot of damage. So just kind of keep that in mind. Then he has an owl drone, which is a little bit of a drone that you can throw out, and then it shoots small darts, and if you see an enemy, you can shoot them with the dart, and then it's going to show up for you and your teammates if you hit them with the dart. It's kind of hard to hit it, but overall, you can just send it out, and you can actually find the location of enemies, which is really, really useful. Information is super useful in this game, and that's why that ability is such a big reason to play Soma. His signature ability is Recon Bolt, so you can kind of shoot an arrow, and it's going to, you know, you can choose how many times it bounces off all walls if you want it to get around a corner or something, and then once it lands, it's going to scan all the enemies around it, and then it's going to show you their location, and the enemy can also shoot it down if they see it and they shoot it first, but usually, you know, maybe you can get one scan in before it gets shot down, so you can kind of get some information on where the enemy is, which is super, super useful. As I said, information is key in this game. And now for his ultimate, you can guess what kind of weapon he's using. Good guess, it is his bow, and with his bow, he shoots 3 massive energy blasts. It can go all the way, you know, you can shoot it through walls, it can go the entire length of the map, and it does a ton of damage. It can nearly kill them with one shot, and yeah, when it's charging up, you can kind of see it through the wall, so you can kind of narrowly evade it, but if you are in a small corridor, and he knows it, and he's like on the opposite side of the map, he can still like destroy a full team if they're all crowded up in one area. So it is pretty useful, especially if you want to support your teammates across the map, but you are like on B, and they're on A, and you still gotta try and stop the push. So it is super useful across the map, and yeah, it is a pretty fun ability to use. So anyway, without further ado, Cypher. Now, if you don't recall what I just said about 20 seconds ago, information is very, very key, and Cypher has a lot of that. His first ability, Trapwire, places a little bit of a trapwire between 2 walls, and it reveals enemies who cross it for a short time, and it can also be picked up, so you can, you know, you can pick it up between rounds so you don't have to rebuy it. His next ability is called Cyber Cage, and it's a little bit of a trap that when activated, slows enemies who pass through it. It is kind of like a smoke grenade, but it is obviously slowing, and it does have a little bit more of a cylinder shape if you cared that much about the exact geometric details. His signature ability is going to be a spy cam, as I said before, and it's kind of just, you can check a remote camera that you can switch to really fast, and then you can look at all the enemies that are wherever you put the camera. It is destroyable, but it is pretty hard to see, and also you can fire tracking darts at enemies like you could with the owl drone thing that I said before, that allow them to be highlighted and tracked for the rest of your team as well. So it is pretty useful, and for his ultimate, it is super good. I think it's probably one of the best in the game, if not the best in the game. And if you have a dead enemy on the ground, you can use your ultimate and it reveals the location of all their allies, so you know where everybody is on the map. It is for a very short period, it is only for 1 second, but it obviously does give you a pretty big advantage, because if you don't know where the rest of the enemies are, but you have killed, you know, a random roamer at B, then you just use your ultimate, and then you're gonna know exactly where they are. Maybe they're sneaking into A, and you're gonna have all the intel in the world that you need to block that attack. So yeah, it is super useful. I'd recommend Cypher if you do want to have all the information in the game, and yeah, I think he's gonna be a top pick in the pro games, or, you know, in pubs, I don't know. But yeah, Cypher is really good, and yeah, I'd recommend using him if you are the kind of player who likes to keep tabs on enemies, just know where they are, because it does give you a massive advantage for you and your team. So yeah, that is Cypher, and without further ado, let's go to Brimstone. Now, Brimstone is a very simple character, so it's going to be pretty easy to go through him. His first ability is going to be an incendiary grenade that he shoots from his incendiary launcher. It's kind of like the firebomb that I explained with the fire dude that I spoke about. Phoenix, that's what it was. Phoenix. So yeah, the incendiary has pretty much the same effects as that. He also has a stim beacon, which is just a little device that you throw down, and if you are within the area of that little device, then your guns are going to shoot way faster. It's going to, you know, give your gun a little bit of a rapid fire effect, which is pretty cool, but, you know, it does make the recoil a little bit harder to control, so just kind of keep that in mind. It is pretty interesting, but I don't know exactly how useful it is in most situations. His signature ability is Sky Smoke, and this is one of the best signatures in the game, and you can use your map to call in 3 different smoke screens to block vision, and these ones last quite a bit longer than, you know, for example, Jett's ones, and you can just kind of choose from the map where you want to drop them, so it's super easy to, you don't even have to peek the angle, you could just chuck it before you even get into the room, and then you're going to have places blocked off. So this one is super useful. It's one of my favorite signature abilities in the game. It's just so useful when you're trying to push into a site and you want to cover all the sight lines where you can get shot from. And as for his ultimate ability, it's going to be an orbital strike, so you can kind of just, you know, go on the map, and then you can choose where you want to do a massive orbital strike that's going to do a ton of damage for a few seconds. So that is pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy to use, but yeah, his Sky Smoke is super useful, and it is pretty useful if you want to be kind of the leader of the team. You know, you want to plan out, you know, if you guys want to push A, then you can kind of put all the smokes down. He does have, you know, pretty simple things, and it is a lot of abilities to support your team. So yeah, that's what I recommend. If you are a very big team player, Brimstone is for you. Now for the next character, it's going to be Sage. Now she's just pretty much Mei if she was a healer. She's the only healer in this game, so it is pretty important to have her on your team. And her first ability is pretty simple. You just kind of chuck a small orb that goes on the ground, and it slows people who are walking in it. It also doesn't allow them to jump up and down. It also makes a little bit of a noise if they're walking through it, so you can kind of hear if someone's flanking you if you kind of just throw it on your flank. Next thing is going to be a barrier orb, and that's just going to create a large wall that you can actually break through if you're on that team or if you're on the opposite team. So it does create a large wall that pretty much will persist forever unless it is destroyed, and it is pretty easy to destroy if you just put a couple bullets in it. So just kind of keep that in mind. Super useful when you're trying to cross a sight line but you don't want to get shot, so you just put up that wall to your right or left or wherever you're probably going to get shot from, and then you're going to be able to walk across it very easily. It is also very useful if you want to prep yourself up, because it is actually a thick thing that you can actually walk on top of, unlike the previous 2 walls we spoke about before. So if you do want to get to impressive places, you know, on top of boxes that you normally couldn't get on top of, you can use it with this barrier orb. Now the next thing she has is her signature. It's going to be a healing orb. You can heal yourself or an ally all the way up to 100 for over several seconds, so it's a little bit of an overtime effect, which is pretty useful if you just, you know, got out of an engagement and you only have 30 HP. This is pretty useful if you want to get all the way back up to 100. Now her ultimate is pretty simple. It's just called Resurrection. You can guess what it does. It reses someone if you're close to them. You have to be pretty close, and then you just res them really quick. It brings them all the way up to full health, so you can do that if it's, you know, your top frag who has 40 kills already. Then maybe you're going to want to res them if it's an important round. And yeah, she is pretty much just the ticket healer hero, so she is pretty important to have. So if you do like playing supporting roles or just healing roles, or you do hate your team and you don't think anybody's as good as you, then you can just heal yourself and not have to depend on any other of your teammates to help you out. You can heal yourself. It's all up to you. You can carry this game if you play Sage. So yeah, without further ado, let's go to Omen, one of my other favorite classes. Omen is pretty much just Reaper from Overwatch, but without as cool of a voice. His first ability, Paranoia, is a little bit of a shadow clone that you throw in one area area, and then, you know, if anybody gets hit by it, then their field of view, or, you know, how far they can see actually is reduced an absolute ton. So if you are more than 5 meters, then you can easily take them out because they're not going to be able to see you. So this is super useful. I think it's super underrated. And yeah, if you know they're all coming out of one corridor, you just chuck one through there, then you can get, you know, like 3 kills, or maybe 1 if you suck, like me. His next ability is going to be
Shadow Walk.
It's pretty much just Shadow Step from Overwatch, and you just kind of teleport a small distance. And this isn't useful for, you know, covering distance if you want to get to another site very quickly. You can't just teleport. You know, it doesn't have that large of a range, but what it can do is it can allow you to get on top of things, you know, maybe get on top of a box you normally couldn't with that character. And it also does allow you to get to the other side of a door, so you can kind of come out of an area that they don't usually expect. So, you know, it's kind of situational, this ability. It's not as long range as you'd expect, but it has its uses, and they can be very effective if you use them right. So his next ability is going to be a signature ability, and it is a dark cover, and it's pretty much just throwing a shadow orb, so you can kind of produce a little bit of a shadow smoke cloud wherever you want on the map. Not wherever you want, but with a pretty far distance, because, you know, you can kind of shoot it through walls, and it is pretty easy to use. It's kind of like, I'd most compare it to the sky smoke that the other dude has that I forgot because I'm too lazy to check. Now this ability is pretty useful in itself because it is smoke, so it can cover sightlines you wouldn't usually be able to cover, but it is also super useful if you play as a roamie. You know, you're sneaking around on A when everybody else on your team is going B, then you can kind of throw, you know, your smoke all the way across the map so you can cover them up when they're trying to push, and you can still, you know, be roaming, and you can kind of do your own thing on the opposite side of the map while helping out your teammates trying to push another area. So it is super useful in that sense, and his ultimate is pretty much just allowing you to teleport anywhere on the map, so you can kind of teleport behind them, maybe in their spawn, and then sneak up behind them. As with all the ultimates in this game, they're going to hear, you know, your character's going to say some kind of thing like,
I will use my ultimate now.
And then boom, they're going to know that. But if you do teleport in the right place, then they're probably not going to expect it, and it can be very useful. Don't try to teleport on top of them, because if they do see your, you know, where you're teleporting, there's about 3 seconds where it can get shot, and then, you know, you're just going to have your ultimate wasted. So just kind of be outside of their range and make sure, you know, they probably won't hear it, and then you're going to have a pretty good time using this ultimate. It can make for a lot of awesome plays if you use them right, just as, you know, most ultimates can. You know, if you use them right, they can be very useful, but this one especially because you can kind of, you know, sneak behind the entire team and get a 5-man. I've never done it, I've never seen it, but probably possible, right? So yeah. The second to last man is going to be Breach, and he's all about breaching through walls and stuff. Not really breaching, but having things go through walls. You get the point. His first ability is going to be Aftershock, so you can kind of shoot an explosive charge through a wall, so if someone's on the opposite side, they're going to take a lot of damage. You can go through pretty thick walls, it just goes directly through, so it can do a lot of damage if you know where the enemy is, but you're going to have to know where they are through a wall, so you just kind of have to have a little bit of help from your teammates to know, you know, get some kind of recon on exactly where the enemy is, so you don't just waste your Aftershock and not do any damage. His next ability is going to be Flashpoint. It's kind of just shooting a flash grenade, but it's going to be going through a wall, so you can kind of just shoot it through the wall, and then it's going to flash them. You can go around and get the kill, so it is pretty useful in that sense. I think it's a little bit easier to use than Aftershock, because you're going to have to directly hit them with Aftershock, while Flashpoint, you can just have it in their view, so that is pretty useful, a little bit easier to use, so I'd recommend doing that whenever you're trying to push through an area as Breach. His signature ability is going to be Fault Line, and it's going to create a concussive quake in a straight line in front of Breach that disorients enemy aim, and it also travels through walls. So this is pretty useful. If you know where they are, just chuck it, and then it's going to shake up their aim, and it is pretty useful. It's almost like a flashbang, but way cooler, and yeah, it can be useful, but it is kind of tough to use, so kind of just, you know, practice with it a little bit so you have a good understanding. And if you've practiced with this ability, then I'm sure it can be super useful once you learn how to use it. I sure haven't, and I'm terrible with it, but maybe you guys can after you put in some time. His ultimate is called the Rolling Thunder, and it is probably my favorite in the game. Maybe not the strongest, but it's definitely my favorite. It creates a massive seismic charge that travels through walls, dazes opponents, and knocks enemies upward. It just looks awesome. It like moves the entire ground up, and it looks really cool. You can just destroy an entire site with it, and it just looks awesome. And if used properly, I'm sure this can be one of the best ultimates in the game. But yeah, I haven't really seen it yet. But it definitely looks cool. That's one thing I can say for sure. Now the final character in this build of the game is going to be Raze. Her first ability is going to be a blast pack, and you can kind of just shoot a blast pack that will stick to surfaces, and if you activate the ability again, it's just going to do a ton of damage, and it is a pretty powerful grenade overall. So the next thing is going to be a boom bot. This one's pretty cool. It's you're going to shoot a little bit of a boom bot out. I don't know if you shoot it out, but you kind of just let a little bit of a boom box go out. It's going to be bouncing off the walls, making a little bit of noise, and once it sees an enemy, it's going to lock onto them, and it's going to start moving towards them. The enemy is probably going to shoot it by then, because because it doesn't take too many shots to kill and it does move in a straight line. But if it reaches them, it does a massive amount of damage. But you can kind of just expect it to be useful because it's going to aim at whatever enemy it sees. So you're going to have a little bit of an intel at where the enemy is if you only see the boombox and you can see that it's going towards one area. So kind of gives you a little bit of intel indirectly. But yeah, this boombox is certainly one of the cooler abilities in this game. And I know I'm writing it on the basis of it being cool, not of how good it is, but you get my point. Probably if it's cool, it's going to be good in most cases, mostly, right? Her signature ability is going to be paint shells, so she shoots a cluster grenade, and then, you know, once it explodes, it's going to break into more grenades, and it does a ton of damage. I haven't even been close to the corner, but, you know, after it gets shot around a wall, you're pretty much dead if you're anywhere close to it. So, you know, it does a ton of damage. If you know people are around a corridor, just use this, and yeah, you don't even have to be remotely close to, you know, shooting them. It's going to get kills anyway. So yeah, it is pretty powerful. It does a lot of damage, and for her ultimate, it's just a it's a rocket launcher. Shoot thing, go explode, rocket boom, explode, damage big, get ace, win game, get job, get pro team, quit pro team because do not like pro team scene, join Twitch, then do Twitch on, no, you get my point. It's pretty powerful. And yeah, that is pretty much all of the agents in Valorant. It's a pretty awesome list. They're very, very different. Each one of them has a bunch of different playstyles. If you use, you know, for example, Raze, maybe you got a little bit of an explosive fever, so you should probably get that checked out. But anyway, jokes aside, the agents in this game are really, really fun to use, and I hope you guys get the opportunity to use them as soon as possible. And from this, you should probably understand, you know, kind of who you're going to want to play. I know I certainly like, you know, the Reaper, and I like the Pyro. So, you know, those are the two classes that I tend to like the most. You should check out which guys you like. And yeah, without further ado, thank you guys all so much for watching. Like if you liked, subscribe if you want to, or if you don't want to. I don't discriminate, and I hope to see you guys all in my next video. Peace.